So
Does
is
this?
so again, just thinking again, we're still talking about. I guess we need to get into delivery, I suppose, but we're almost edging into that now when you're talking about tonality. We've all been there, haven't we? We've listened to a talk and the person is at the front of the room and they're talking like this. And after about 5 minutes, you just think this is going to be the most boring talk in the history of the world. And it does turn out that way. And I've been up early in the morning and I'm starting to fall asleep and my eyes are feeling heavy. How do, how do we avoid that? So let's talk a bit about, if you can, about moving into this delivery. You talk
Yeah,
about tone of voice, and I did find myself because I was picturing the farm, and therefore I was
yeah,
able to describe the picture of what I was seeing in much more colourful, I guess, language. But so yeah, what are the keys for delivery, David? As if you're doing a presentation, again, primarily think about it in terms of schools and colleges and maybe local conventions or maybe a young farmers meeting or whatever. I'm thinking particularly those areas where people don't know about farming. What do we have to think about in terms of our delivery?
okay. I would say that as much as possible, if you can give people an experience, so get them doing or thinking something during your talk that convinces them of what it is you're trying to say, so they believe it rather than just hear it and maybe believe it.
So, are you talking therefore? I'm again thinking about particularly we're talking about our farms or the industry. Are you talking about? I mean, it may not be practical, of course, to bring a piece of kit into a school, but it can be, into the
Yeah,
playground. Whenever you bring your tractor on, and you actually have, or is it the classic sort of cliched visual aid? Do we need to bring in soil and seeds and make it more, how the wheat goes from being a seed to being 4 foot 5 foot tall or whatever. Do we need pictures? What do you mean in terms of how do we bring it alive?
so I would okay, let's talk about the height of crops, just for example. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, I live in a semi-rural area. I kind of know how high crops are, but to a student who is not living out in the countryside, they probably haven't got a Scooby-Doo. They haven't got a clue. So you could actually get three people out the front, someone who's perhaps shorter, someone who's average height, and someone who's really tall. And you could say, so when you're in the middle of a field, you might think you can just see forever, but actually, depending upon the crop, you might not be able to see. So let's talk about the different heights of crops. So, for example, and get the audience to vote on how high they think wheat is, how high do they think corn and maize grows,
Mhm.
and pampas, and so get them to interact with the content, and they get it. If you might say, actually, it's a physical job. You need to be fit, healthy, and strong to work on a farm, which is true. How can you evidence this to them? Say, well, if you work, I don't know, for example, on a sheep farm, if you're working with sheep, you might think, oh, little fluffy woolly things, and then have something with you that is up the approximate weight of a fully grown sheep.
I was just thinking of a big bag of sand or something like that, and
Absolutely.
or if you're a dairy farmer and you want to talk about calf rearing and how you have to lift calves sometimes, people often think, again, they think if again we're talking again particularly about people who are not aware of farming and we're trying to educate them and excite them about the possibility of working in farming. Yeah, have sort of visual representations. If you can't physically bring an animal in, because that's not always easy, have something that's equivalent too. So yeah, why is it important we're fit and strong? Well, you try lifting up this bag of sand here. That's the average weight of a young calf. So
Yeah.
so why is that important, Dave? Does that bring the talk alive, or is it about bringing the audience in? What's the
Yeah, it
for
it
that?
makes it makes it real to them. They believe it.
Mhm.
You don't have to convince them because they're believing what they're doing. So if I give you a personal example, I don't do what a lot of speakers do when it comes to teaching memory skills.
Mhm.
A lot of people who teach memory skills will demonstrate their prowess at memory skills. The audience go, wow, that's amazing. And the speaker feels good. But if you're going in service of the audience, the point is to get them doing it. So I teach them how to do a great memory skill. They apply it and they go, wow, I did that. That is incredible. Then they'll believe anything you say after that.
So maybe it's having something you can say demonstrate, or they can have a go at. Again, machinery is often great. You have to check the regulations and check with the local authority if you bring in a tractor into a school. But that can be something where we bring it alive. I think a lot of people outside of farming still don't understand the types of machinery we use, the science and technology that we apply to growing crops, to managing our soil, to making sure that the soil is regenerated. The whole idea of regenerative farming can be really interesting to young people. So what we're saying here in terms of delivery is bring that alive. You don't have to stand and talk for 20 minutes. You can get people involved in your talk. You can get them engaged, having a go at things. And actually, I would give a quick tip then is often people bring far too much content for the time they're given.
Always. I still do.
we've all been there, haven't we? Where we think, I'll tell them about this. I'll tell them about, I've been given 15 minutes to do a talk at school. I'll tell them about that. And, half an hour later, you're only on slide 2. So you've got to think about often cut it, slice it, reduce it, because it will always take longer than I think, even if we're rehearsing it, even if we're talking through our what we want to say, we won't have thought about, well, somebody will ask me a question there, or I need to demonstrate this there. So be careful how much content we put in, I would say, as well, in terms of delivery. Make your points punchy. What are the key things you said at the beginning, Dave? What's the key things you want people to take away? Well, that's why I thought your idea of working from the end is really good. So what are the key messages I want them to take away? Well, just work backwards from that. Those are the only points I need to make in my talk. And then what we're saying now is, how can we have something that involves the audience, demonstration? I always remember the classic one, you must have seen it, where people are talking about time management. And you take a glass bowl, that classic one where you put rocks in at the bottom, and then you say, well, is it full? And people will go, well, not quite, because there's gaps in between the rocks. And then you put some sand in and say, well, is it full now? And they go, yeah, it's full now. And then you pour some water in, and actually the water still goes in. But it's a visual demonstration of, we often think, well, time is, we can squeeze more in. And actually the point being is, if we'd put the water and the sand in first, the small tasks, we wouldn't be able to get the rocks in, which are our big tasks. So that's a visual demonstration of the message you're trying to give. So are we saying that's a good idea, to try and use some visuals?
Props, visual aids that demonstrate what it is you're trying to say. Anything that breaks it up from them just looking at you speaking is always a good thing, especially if you look like me.
Okay, so just come up with the questions for you, Dave. So what are your thoughts on, okay, we're farmers, we can be a bit mucky, we can be a bit smelly, depending on what we've been doing that day. How about our appearance and how we look to people? Do we have to sort of suddenly put on a shirt and tie and look like we're not who we are? But how about tips on not only what we wear and how we look, but maybe how we stand? Is there anything about posture that's important when we're speaking?
Oh, now I can tell you're a pro, because the posture is just as important as how you look. Now, they will expect a farmer to come dressed like a farmer. But what I would say to you is, obviously, have a nice shower.
Yes.
Put a comb or a brush through your hair. And the trick with speaking is to be either one level up or one level down in your appearance or smartness to your audience. If you want to come across as authoritative and commanding, it's one level of smartness above the audience. So if the audience are, for example, young people, and they're wearing a school uniform with a blouse or a shirt and tie, you need to wear a really nice suit and a polished pair of shoes. Really nice. However, if you want to
pause there, Dave, I would suspect most of the people listening, if they wear a suit, it's to weddings and funerals. Yeah. So I know in the farming industry there is a look, and there's the look, what I call the on-farm look, which is clothes that probably should have been thrown out 20 years ago, dirty, tatty, because we're going to get mucky. But I know a lot of you listening here will have a jacket, you'll have a shirt and a tie that you can put on. So we're not necessarily saying go out to Moss Bros and hire a suit that you'd wear to your wedding or a funeral, but we are talking about there's
a smart lounge suit, or a clean check shirt, a nice clean brushed moleskin gilet, or wear your
exactly.
shoes instead of your hunter wellies, and
it's the tweed jacket type approach.
yeah,
That's what, and that's the smart version of farming. So don't worry if you haven't got a dark black suit with shiny shoes, but it isn't about turning up in what you've just been doing the ploughing in or the dairy farming. That's the step up for a farmer, isn't it?
And then the opposite is true. If you want to come across as approachable, friendly, informal, really, you can come and talk to me, you can trust me. The idea is to be just one level of smartness below them. So if they're wearing a shirt and tie, you wear an open shirt and a casual jacket.
So how about posture then? What's this thing about posture?
Yeah, the posture is important, Paul.
And what do you mean by posture?
Well, posture, okay, the posh name for it is your deportment, how you deport yourself. So posture is about how you stand. Will you sit? Will you lean against a desk? Will you lean on a lectern if you're on a big stage? Will you pace up and down nervously? And by the way, you can spot speakers who are nervous because they do one of two things. They will either walk forwards and backwards nervously. We call that the cuckoo. Because it looks like a cuckoo clock, or they'll do, if any of you are old enough to remember the shadows dance, where they tend to walk in a circle on the spot nervously, waist up, they're trying to control themselves, but waist down, their nerves give it away. So with posture, ideally do one of two things. You either stand up straight and hold your head up, because that opens up the airways, it helps you project your voice, and it makes you appear more positive because you've got your head up. Have you ever heard the expression, things are looking up? And that's where the expression comes from. So hold your head up, speak positively with a smile on your face, stand up straight and hold the spot.
And how about the pace that we speak, Dave? I speak very fast, and something I'm aware of when I'm speaking from stage is, you can use pace for energy. But if I'm a bit of a gabbler and you talk far too fast, people can't hear what you're saying. So how about recognizing our pace of language? Is that important, and can we vary that in a talk?
It is. I'll just finish what I was going to say before, if I can. So please remind me to answer that question, Paul. So the opposite is also true. If you want to appear a bit more relaxed, still stand up straight and speak with certainty. But once you've held the spot and spoke for a moment, move to the right and speak to people over there for 40 seconds, and then move over to the left, stand and hold that position and talk for a while, and then go back to the center and talk again. That actually shows a great deal of confidence and competence. But the last thing you want to do is just aimlessly, and if you watch comedians, their content is great, but their nerves, they're pacing around all the time, unless you watch the real class ones, and they will stand, hold their position, or if they move, it's for a reason, if that makes sense.
So you're talking about purposeful movement, posture, and then what's purposeful? I'm saying that purposeful pace.
Easy for you to say.
That's a tongue twister if there was one.
Will one get right?
Yeah.
Purposeful voice.
Doing today, well done, my words. So purposeful pace, what would that be?
Okay, there are two things I'd say on this subject. Number one is that when you're nervous, you will either clam up and speak like a robot, or you'll speak really, really quickly, and because your brain can create images quicker than you can talk, you'll be thinking about what you're saying, and you'll end up falling over yourself, catching your breath, and then you'll go again and speak. The way to get over that is to think of it as telling a story. So in a story, and I'm deliberately changing my voice now to try and make a point. If I was talking about memory skills, I would talk about someone who struggled at school, wasn't very clever. Then they learned a memory technique. They practiced it for just 5 to 10 minutes a day. And you can see the way I'm changing my tone, the expression of my voice. And when you do that, it helps you control the pace. So that's one thing you can do. The second thing is, if you're slightly more advanced than that, and you want a really cool technique for getting rapport, by that I mean engaging with the room, is get there early and listen to the people in the room. Each group of people tends to be very much alike. And whilst, as Paul has alluded to before, we are individuals, we all have different personality styles and traits, but when it comes to a group of people engaging with each other, they will either, majority of which speak slow, deliberate, methodical, very, very well considered things they're talking about, or maybe they're kind of middle of the road, upbeat, sometimes, yeah, fairly upbeat, but middle of the road in their pace, or they're a bit manic. Now, and I call it radio stations, it's like Radio 1, Classic FM, and Radio 4. And if you're a Radio 4 audience and you've got someone standing at the front who's a Radio 1, it's like a total mismatch, a clash of communication. The opposite is also true. If you've got a Radio 1 audience, maybe a group of young people, and you're presenting from Radio 4, there's a mismatch of communication again. So this is an advanced skill, and I don't suggest people try this at the beginning, but maybe when you've done a few talks and you're getting more comfortable, try this.
Well, I think you made a good point though, Dave, there about, again, I'm thinking very much about our farming listeners, that, if you, it's going right back to knowing your audience. So thinking at the beginning, asking the organisers who's likely to be there, are they listening to the Archers or are they listening to Top of the Pops? There's a bit of my age now, and Top of the Pops doesn't even exist anymore. But, that knowing your audience again can therefore affect the pace at which you want to deliver and the style of delivery. Right, let's think about, we've had the talk, we've done our demonstrations, we've got people involved. Just, I think, as part of closing this session, how do we close a good talk? How do we finalize it? And how do we really leave people with something? Some tips on that?
Yeah, as alluded to earlier, you use an analogy, a metaphor, a story, a statistic. The best thing you can do is have a call to action. If you've told them what, shown them how, and given them why they should engage with your message, at the end, give them a call to action. Challenge them, throw down a gauntlet. Join me on this crusade to have non-genetically modified crops. Join me on this farm to come and forge your career in the farming industry on our farm. Come and learn to not plough your fields and instead drill different plants and have crop rotation to better naturally fertilize the ground, and do whatever it takes to have a final call to action. So, and you've heard the expression on the stage, leave them wanting a little bit more. Ask them to get in touch with you. If anybody would like to get in touch, I'll leave my details with the organizer. Please drop me a call. But don't just finish with, thank you very much, I'm done. Don't finish like
that. I have heard people who sort of say it's sort of what I call dribbles out. So we've said something and said, anyway, I think that's about it. I think, that's done. And it's not people wanting more. People are thinking, what, is that it? Have we finished now? So we're talking, you said finish strongly. So whether it's a question, whether it's a suggestion where people can go. So if I'm talking to young people in colleges or schools, talk to your careers advisor, ask them about what farming can do. Speak to some colleges. Here's some names of colleges. Harper Adams, it could be whatever it might be, but give people somewhere to go afterwards, particularly. And if you want more information about this, you can go to www.whatever. But give people something to do, I think is your point, as well as they've already been thinking about what you're saying, something for them to go ahead and do. And I think with us as farmers, we really want people to engage with us more, whatever it is that we're talking about. And again, particularly thinking about young people, engaging them, is they need to know where to go next. If you've inspired them, they love the idea of what farming might be. Particularly, again, I'm talking to those farmers that might be going into more urban areas and trying to get people who've not even considered agriculture as a career, then give them somewhere to go to get more information, because that's critical. Otherwise, what we can happen after a talk, isn't it, is to me, it's the difference between inspiration, an inspirational talk that goes, yeah, I feel great after that talk, and then it just disappears afterwards, with a talk more informational and motivational, where it gets me to do something afterwards.
And that's the key message. That's what we're trying to do. Get them to do something, think differently, behave better. That's being in service of the audience.
Awesome.
Well, I'd like to leave people today with 2 little tips.
Mm-hmm.
Number 1 is notes. Now we can have our notes written on a piece of paper in big sentences in black and blue ink that you're never going to be able to read properly. And if you do, you'll catch yourself looking down at your notes, trying to find where you are on the page.
Or even saying, I've lost my place. Hang on a second. Let me just find my place. Yeah, you don't want to be saying that, do you either? No.
So instead of that, let me show you one in the words of, was it Blue Peter? Do you remember that? Here's one I made earlier, right? So these are my bullet point notes for this session.
So Dave's holding up a piece of paper here. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm holding up a piece of paper with key words, and each word is a different color. So I've started off with a red why. So we talked about you've got to know why you're speaking. What is it you're trying to achieve? Why are you there? What's the core message? What's the outcome, and what do you want them to say? So the word outcome is in purple, the word say is in green. Now, I know what to say around that message. If you listen back, hopefully, Paul and I told you about this, but it's just 3 words. I haven't got a big paragraph of black and blue text that I've got to try and find where I am in my notes. I just glance at this, straight to the next point. The next thing we talked about was having a start, middle, and end. And for those who are listening to this, in black marker pen, I've got start, M, I know that's middle, end. I don't need lots and lots of words because I know how to talk about start, middle, and end. And Paul and I did that for you. The next word is in red. It says the word serve. The next to it, 3 things in green. We talked about how you've got to serve your audience by not saying it, not telling it, but convincing people. And I've got say, tell, convince. Then I've got some four little colours to talk about the coloured use of notes, like I'm doing now. And the last thing is hecklers.
Oh, now mention that, Dave. We'll love a good heckler.
So we're going out on this is the high impact bit. You see, the heckler go out on a bang. The most people are nervous because they're seeking approval.
Mm-hmm.
If you're there in service, you don't need approval. You're there to make a difference. So give your best. However, once in a blue moon, you'll get somebody or a table or a group who, for whatever reason, decide on board, I'm going to try and sabotage this. And they will ask deliberately awkward, sometimes downright nasty questions. It doesn't happen very often, but every now and again, you get a heckler. The best way to handle this is a bit different to how most presentation skills teachers would tell you to handle it. Now, Paul, you have no idea what we're doing. I'm going to ask you to, if I was talking about goal setting, massive goals, and you don't agree, and you're the kind of person that says exactly what he thinks. So just give me a heckle. I'm talking about massive goals, how you should set big goals. Realistic goals don't work. What would you say to me?
Okay, Mr. Hymer, I hear what you're saying about goal setting. Prove it, mate. What is it? I know lots of people who've set goals. They've never achieved anything. They never achieved. It's a waste of time. Absolute waste of time. I think you're talking rubbish.
Okay. And you could expect that to happen. Now, there are one of 2 ways of handling this. The one is what most people would do, which is try to convince them. They'll go, oh, well, let me tell you. I personally have used it. The reason you should do this is because, blah, 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 and they try and justify their standpoint. Here's something a bit different for you to try. If somebody has a problem with something you've talked about, it's because we haven't presented it in a way that they understand. That's our fault. And we're in service. So let's just, and by the way, I used to think that massive goals was rubbish and we should set smart goals. I used to believe that. So here's what I would do in this situation. I would get over myself and I would accept the fact that Paul has a genuine challenge. I would say, if Paul came at me like that, I'd say, you know what, Mr. Harris, I used to think that too. I used to believe all massive goal setting was rubbish. We should all set smart goals. It's taught on business schools. After all, they must be right. However, and now I go into my justification. Now I've got him on side saying I'm just like you. I believed it was rubbish too. However, in the last 26 years, I've interviewed 258 top achievers, and not one of them set smart goals. They all set massive goals. Now, 23 years into a speaking career, 1.2 million people have heard this message. And Mr. Harris, I can promise you, the people who have used this and the things that they have achieved, I can't believe in smart goals anymore. I don't know about you.
So here's my ABC of how to deal with a heckle.
Oh, bring it on.
Which has just come to me. And it may not be a heckle. It may be a difficult question. Again, it could be, I'm thinking about our farming team again out there, that it might be a student at a college says, yeah, but farming's for thick kids, isn't it? Or something like that, or farming's for duffers, for people that, have not done well at school. Whatever it is, and we don't agree with it. I think what you just said and what came to me as was the ABC was, first of all, A is acknowledge. Acknowledge what the person has said. Don't immediately push back. The second one actually to me would be breathe. Okay, before we respond, because it may well be put your heckles up. So just take a breath and then go into this convincing mode, so the ABC. So then it's not about convincing somebody against their will, because if we convince somebody against their will, they're probably of the same opinion still. Peter Thompson would have said that. So actually, it's not about convincing them, it's about being convincing. So it's about believing in what 100%. You're saying. So maybe it's acknowledge, believe, and convince, or acknowledge and be convincing. But it's that acknowledge first. Acknowledge. I would say acknowledge, breathe, relax, don't get your own heckles up, and then be convincing. Believe in your message. You don't have to go, well, maybe you're right. Yeah, perhaps it is for thick kids. Yeah. In fact, thinking about it, lots of thick kids do come into farming. No. Yeah, I can see why you think. I can see why you might think that farming is for people that have struggled at school, but actually, the amount of science and technology that's in farming now, the amount of potential career opportunities you've got, doesn't mean that's a barrier. Just because you've not succeeded at school, I've seen, lots of young people who maybe have struggled at school because they don't learn in a linear fashion, but actually the practical side of farming is awesome for them. So but I acknowledge the why you might think that, but then we breathe and then we go into this sort of be convincing mode. Is that helpful?
Beautiful and well said. I mean, absolutely, that is the technique. Acknowledge, give new information, and then certainty, conviction.
Conviction, that's a good word.
But with a very unthreatening voice, open gestures, very unthreatening. Just say, I can't believe in massive goals anymore. I don't know about you. And then just carry on. But you validated them. Yeah. And if you point at them and say, do you know what? That is a great question. And don't point at someone if you're having a go at them. Only point at them if you're praising them. There's a whole thing around that psychology-wise. It validates them, and you literally see them smile and sit up an inch as if to say, yes, I'm right, aren't I? And it gets them on your side. And then they could be your biggest advocate.
The other benefit of, whether it's pointing them literally or saying, what a great question, is that gives you the time to breathe, brain to engage and think how I'm responding. It's just that moment of pause. What a great question that is. I've been asked that question before, and it just gives the brain time to think, right, how am I going to respond to that? It's the breathe part almost of just that pause. So any final thoughts then? We've talked a lot about presenting this morning, from the planning and preparation stage through to the delivery stage, and some tips on delivery and closing. Any final thoughts, Dave, on how we can present the farming industry, the agricultural industry, outside of farming?
I think it would be amiss of us not to finish with a bang. So I've said you should have a call to action and challenge people to do something, think or behave differently. So here we go, my little chickens. As a result of this training, you've learned that you've got to have a reason why you speak. Work on the outcome. Work on what it is you're going to say and what you want to say. Have that start, the middle and end. And what do we start with? We start with the end in mind. So craft that thing until you can't get it wrong. Then craft the beginning until you can't get it wrong. Then create the structure in the middle of your core message. Go to serve that audience. Don't say it. Don't tell people. Convince people with your gesture, your tone, your body language, and everything about you. Handle those hecklers with authenticity, get them on side and acknowledge them before daring to challenge them. Use coloured notes so that you know where you are. And here's the call to action the next time you give a presentation. Go through these notes that you've made on this call and use them.